and welcome everybody for another episode of Healthy and Active in the Couve. I am Nick. I'm a personal trainer and nutrition coach at Northwest Personal Training. And my co-host, as normal, is Dr. Trent Corey. He is a physical therapist. You can find him at Chi Running and Find Yourself Running. He does a lot of running things, and we can talk about all the information for contact in a second. But we've got a super exciting topic. One of my favorite things in the world right now is the knees over toes guy. I've got a lot of clients asking for it, and a lot of people who need it and don't know it. But it's one of my favorite things to talk about for knee health. And I would love to geek out on this subject with you, Trent. Let's talk about Ben Patrick and the knees over toes guy for knee health.
Awesome. I'll just push my glasses up to be more geeky and nerdy about the whole topic. Yeah, it's been kind of taking the internet by storm. A lot of people know who he is, and if you don't, that's okay. You can keep looking at. We maybe can include some links of what he's able to offer. A lot of great advice in terms of videos to help improve the resiliency of how the knee moves and get things moving in a way that's therapeutic. So his story was that he had a knee injury and then he rehabbed himself through some training methods. And, a lot of people have been kind of misled to think that, since, a lot of people have been taught to squat and not to put their knees too far over their toes, that actually the knees over your toes was a bad thing. And actually, it's kind of ridiculous. And all of us knew this in the PT world. Everybody knows about this. When you're going down a stair, you have to put your knee over your toe. You have to do that. So, unless you're not going to go up and down stairs anymore, you need to put your knees over your toes. And so that's a big thing that he's been kind of leading the charge of how important it is to have that gradual improvement of your knee strength, especially that quad tendon over the kneecap in deeper ranges of flexion, and doing that in a smart way though. So hey, you put more pressure in the front of your knee. Yes, that's true. But that's not necessarily a bad thing because the body needs to adapt to loads that are greater so it can handle those things. So you have people who try to do squats and they only dip down to just a little tiny bit of what they can do. And then whenever their knee goes past that and they have to strain out of a deeper position of flexion, they can't do it. And that's why they can't squat so low and that kind of thing. So he's called to into attention a lot of things to improve that mobility, to get your strength of the tendons, the ligaments, not just muscle. Right? A lot of times we think in terms of strengthening, we think about the muscle, right? Try to get your muscle stronger, but actually through torquing your knee, working your knee through different angles, we can go through them, but basically, when you're doing like your basic split squat, when you're putting your knee up here and you're kind of leaning yourself forward, and you can do this at various heights, but as you put your weight through here, you're going to have increased pressure in the knee, but then also you can do, and I don't have it with me, but you can actually hold on to something or push through something so you can go through the range that's deeper, but then have something to unload your knee so then you can handle those pressures, because you don't want to shy away from it. That's the thing. We want to actually, meet it where our body's resisted or where we're having challenges, that we don't just shy away from those spots and those those areas that we don't, we don't want to have these blind spots in our motion. We want to be able to do these things. So it's been really helpful for me to understand. It's been definitely part of what I've integrated with a lot of my knee clients, and all the other things that he teaches has been great, really good to get things started. And so it's been a really great intro to, I show a lot of people those kind of things from that. And oftentimes I'll even show them the book, which is the Knee Ability Zero and the ATG for Life plan that they have. A very simple book, very much screenshotted from a lot of his YouTube videos, and it definitely helps people understand the basis of that. So, yeah.
Well, one of my favorite things, and I talk with a lot of my private clients and even my group clients about this, because everybody has some kind of knee issue that I run into, whether it's an old injury or it just is feeling off. And I love his protocol of walking backwards, or even walking backwards uphill, and even walking backwards with a sled. And so I try to do all of those things at an appropriate level. But then some of the education of like how the vastus medialis oblique works for patellar traction and things like that.
Mhm.
What are some of the therapies that you find as a physical therapist work well for even those non-standard, hard to identify for a personal trainer kind of knee pain? What do you find a lot of those things are issues with?
Well, definitely part of this, the patellar tracking, but like you look at the kneecap and how it moves and how different muscles are pulling in different directions, but you also got to look at how that femur's rotating. So what's going on at the hip? So that's one thing. I was talking to somebody just the other day about how we need to make sure that our hips are working well, that our glutes are tracking, so you don't have that internal rotation of the femur, right? So if your femur's rotating in, then relatively, then your upper leg bone is rotating underneath and causing that knee to go out. And you think it's just due to this weakness here. Well, maybe it is, and definitely most people need to build a quad to get a shock absorbing effect. And that's another thing we haven't talked about is the shins, right? So getting the shins going, the more you get this muscle kicking on, you think about
Yes.
the big fat muscle in the back. I know this is great camera work, I know, but like the idea is like, okay, you got to get the strength in the muscles in the front so you can actually create the shock absorbing effect so your joint doesn't take that out. So the things that he's talking about, the things that we're walking backwards, we're actually pushing. You're literally, when you're walking backwards, your knee, your knee is over your toe and you're actually going toe to heel and walking this way. And then actually as you are here, you're pushing with your quad, especially when you got load and you're pushing, you're actually really using those quads. And anybody who's done a backward sled or walked uphill backwards or do something like that, you definitely feel the quads burning. And of course that needs to be done correctly and with the right amount of effort. And, he says oftentimes regress before you progress. You don't
Hmm.
need to, it isn't about crushing it and trying to do more. It shouldn't hurt while you do it. It should just feel like, oh, just feels like some work. And that's a big thing, is trying to make sure those quads are strong. But a big thing that I see is like, and it's part of what I feel is a little bit maybe a blind spot of what that's maybe I'm missing out on some of the stuff that they go through, but I don't see a lot of that lateral stuff that they talk about, getting your hips stronger, getting activation so you're tracking well. And a lot of times it's not just about pure strength, it's about timing and just getting a feel for how you're tracking well when you're doing a lunge or that kind of thing. So you're making sure your knee isn't diving in, those kind of things. Those kind of, I mean, you just don't want things to be going without saying. I feel like some of that has maybe gotten lost track a little bit in there, but that's just a minor criticism. I really feel like there's a lot in there where you're getting that lengthening also of your hip flexors, right? You're
Right.
getting things to open up. Some people are so tight as a drum right in the hip flexor and into the quad, and that actually limits, especially with patellofemoral pain, which is so common, kneecap pain, anything around the front. Just if you're just bound down tight, this is a tight rubber band, that goes around towards your knee. So that really pulls that tight down into the femur, right? So the more you can kind of loosen up the tissues around that, encourage those stretches that he talks about, like the couch stretch, right? Getting into some sort of thing where you're kind of putting your back foot on something and this is too high for me, but the idea is like you get on your couch and do some degree of hip extension and knee flexion, and then just really getting that to open up quite a bit. That in combination with doing some soft tissue work, doing your rowing, or you got your gua sha tools, all these things that are accessible for people, definitely can really help open things up. And there's multiple things we look at in the clinic, but typically if we can start addressing those strength deficits, and obviously there's a lot of flexibility things with it as well, but another one is ankle lack of mobility, and also the soleus strength that he talks about. A lot of people are very weak with a bent knee heel raise. They have a hard time doing that. But more so I see with the back to the wall toe raises, a lot of people can't do more than 20 without losing full height.
Oh yeah.
They get burnt out pretty quick. They're pretty surprised, and you can't believe they can't do very many more.
Well, and then they stay with how much pain they're in.
Right. Yeah, totally. So that's what we've tried to make sure that all those things are cleared of. So we look and screen people with knee pain, like what kind of things do we see that are off with that? And that's where it's a good place to start. And then obviously looking at an exam with PT, also will look at how the whole body left and right is moving. Like there's something going on with how your torso's twisted, or one side's easier to twist than the other. That can obviously switch how your pelvis is positioned. That's kind of creating why your foot's landing at a certain position, and that's causing your knee to dive in. All these things that kind of they all kind of follow each other, and that one can cause the other. That just looking at those links, and that will help more address like more of the cause of the issue versus just kind of like, well, let's just let's do the voodoo floss, let's wrap it up, and let's do some soft tissue on it, and or my soft wave now. I can soft
Right.
wave and put the shock on it, and really create some healing stimulus to that area. But if I don't address that whole mechanical thing, if your knees are diving in extremely, that could be thing that we may need to look at. But it's not always something we have to be too concerned about, because we do have what's great is our bodies do have a lot of grace in how we're allowing our bodies to people have these feet collapsing in, and we have marathoners where their knees are all over the place, and you're like, they must be having a major problem, and they don't. So
Right.
sometimes we get too wound up into all these like, oh, this is the problem. We just need to kind of see, especially as the problem's there, that we look at address it, all these things that might be the most egregious problems that we need to address, and make sure that we're addressing it in a way that's manageable. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, I love that. Even the fact that you mentioned the anterior tibialis, I'm a big proponent of working that. I even put kettlebells at the end of somebody's foot and have them raise it up. And then like you were describing the toe lifts against the wall. For some people who've never done that, the onset muscle soreness the next day is so bad. But sometimes even like if the tibia and fibula aren't set correctly against like the knee, would doing some of these movements from knees over toe guide be beneficial, or would they not be the right movement for them if, say, like their shin bones are off?
Well, you go through the motions, and a lot of times, if we just kind of increase the capacity of that load, that shock absorber, I kind of look at it as a strut or a shock absorber in your body. If you don't have any capacity to those tendinous attachments, and and actually where that tibialis attaches to the foot, it's kind of on the top, and it kind of helps create that arch in that foot. So the stronger and more attached that is, the better usually things will control, and everything needs to be kind of done in a gradual way. Typically, you start introducing this, like you said, people get started, they're like, whoa, this is way more than I'm used to doing. And the key is to kind of build that up. But that sometimes can help correct some of that major impact that's kind of causing things to shoot up through the joint. And if we can kind of build that over time, then we have less impact. And usually then body has its own capacity to then have less impact while you're doing regular activity. And like we tell people, it's like we want movement. Movement is medicine, running is rehab. We want them to be active. But now, since we've maybe built up, over time, some strength and capacity of all those connective tissues and the muscles that are more shock absorbing, now we can go through those regular movements, maybe with slight modification, but even just doing the same old thing. But now our bodies are better able to take that load now and then adapt as we go, and then it's fine. So sometimes you just have to watch, especially if there's some sort of weird alignment thing going on. We just have to make sure that as you do those movements, you're tolerating it well and not get too caught into every single little aspect of everything. Just making sure that we have the actual ankle mobility. So a lot of times, getting your knees over your toes, you just literally can't do it. We have people do the knee to toe, or we did it in the workshop, the foot and ankle workshop. It's the heel to wall test, which is just basic, or what do you call it? Knee to wall test. Sorry, I didn't even name it right. But the idea is like, let's see if I can do this. I don't know. I'll try it here. So the idea is like, if I just had a wall, right? If I'm just trying to get my foot away from the wall, and then I'm just going to try to bring my knee over my toe to see if I can touch the wall. And I'm going to see if my foot can be, my heel can stay on the ground, and then that I'm able to get my knee, so my toe is still like 4 or 5 inches from the wall, and I can still easily get my knee to touch the wall without my heel collapsing all the way in, right? So that just kind of shows, and a lot of people are just really stuck there. And when that doesn't move well, then that kind of causes grief up north. So if we can get everything else moving better, that's a big one with the squat. We just need to get that moving well. So I find that I'm working a lot with ankle mobility with knee issues, and then it's usually a lot of hip strength with a lot of people. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's one of my first things when I became a coach. I would usually say your knee issue isn't a knee issue; it's usually something in your ankle or your hip. As far as like my thing that for strengthening people. But yeah, I agree with you. A lot of the lateral motions in his thing aren't happening, but I think he's got a lot of good focus like that I wouldn't have otherwise known had it not been for him bringing it to the forefront in social media. So I'm very thankful for that because it's helped a lot of my clients.
Cool.
Um, but yeah, I like a lot of that stuff. And one last thing before you go, I'm a huge proponent of all the different mobility kinds of works, especially like cars and joint things. How much should we be working on rotating the knee this way as a function of the knee movement rather than hinging?
Yeah, you're talking about tibial rotation, right? So a
Yeah,
lot of people are pretty restricted, and it just depends on where, some people have a lot of, they're either anteverted or retroverted in their hips, and then they might have a compensatory. So if they're rotated out with their hips, they may have a compensatory rotation in, or they both could be rotated out and they're really duck-footed, So we just have to kind of pay attention to where, like, so the femur, you got this like neck and it goes to the socket, but some femurs are kind of like more this way, some are this way, and then you can do a test to see where people are, and you kind of see. So sometimes it's not anybody's fault if their knees just kind of collapse in, but then that relates to what happens at the tibia as well. But some people are pretty stuck in those areas, so a lot of times we can work on improving that. Also with knee flexion, when we do mobilization, we'll actually do a little rotatory movement of the tibia as we go. So as you flex in, so if I'm doing flexion in and I'm just doing a mobilization, I don't push straight in and just go straight plane. I'll actually rotate. I don't know if you can see, but I'm trying to rotate in as I come in like this. So that's an accessory motion because it's just how it's called the screw home mechanism. It's basically based on the condyles of the femur and how you do have a degree of rotation when your knee flexes and extends. And so doing those types of things can really open up the joint a bit more. So we do some of that with people, and that sometimes that leads to a lot better range of motion because you're not just going straight plane into the anatomy of the joint. You're actually kind of creating a thing where it can kind of flow downhill to where it's naturally trying to work into that joint. So as it flexes and as it extends. So that's kind of the idea. And so, yeah, definitely a thing we need to look at and make sure we're good and making sure our feet are in good alignment, that our feet aren't completely, if they are kind of flat, maybe a lot of times, as you know, we talk about foot strength and getting those feet strong, or having at least activation and a sense of how our bodies need to feel the ground and adapt well and have a good sense of where our body sits over those feet as we walk and as we move. So all those things play a big part of it for sure.
but we're all connected. Like the whole thing is a system. You just talked about the tibialis and the anterior tibialis being connected and creating an arch in your foot. So when you work on the strength of the arch of the foot, it kind of goes all the way up.
Yep.
One of the key things I hear from Ben Patrick, and I heard from you talking about it today, is we don't have to be so afraid of moving our bodies. And probably a lot of our aches and pains are caused from our inhibitions of you can't go knees over your toes, so don't do it. And then you start doing it a little bit and you get an injury because you've avoided something. So
Yes.
I like that you talked about today and in other places that I've seen you speak, and then that what Ben Patrick does is let's not be afraid of our bodies. We can move and we can adapt as long as we do it in a regress and then go from regression to progression appropriate. But we don't have to fear our bodies as much as we might have in the past.
Right, exactly. Go from the fear avoidance model or just purely a biomechanical model to more of this biopsychosocial model where we understand that we have this sense of optimism, movement optimism, feeling positive in what we can do, and that we understand the resilience, and we are, as I said at the last workshop, I said, we are here as descendants from a long lineage of, of our ancestors who have adapted over time, and here we are, and we are able to be strong and resilient, and it's about what we feel in terms of taking on that power and feeling comfortable in that power versus being afraid of it or trying to shy away from it. So a lot of times the things that we give us the most, there's a lot of power behind the things we fear, is what I'm getting to, is that as we kind of reach those new encounters of motion, we realize, oh, I had more capacity in me than I did. And so that's what's exciting about me when I show people and get them rehabbing and feeling better. They find a new level that they didn't know existed, and that's what's fun. So it's great.
Well, I love all that. I don't even know if I've talked about this with you before, but I'm also a music teacher. And a lot of times, both in music and in personal training, I get perfectionists that want to have technique perfect before they even do anything. So a lot of times I try to take the fear out of doing something incorrect, because that inhibits you from even progressing at all. So I love that tactic. And we work towards the technique and perfection and get it down rather than having it hinder us from reaching our potential. So this we'll figure out when it's not good for us, when it hurts and we don't do it anymore, and then then we work away from that and then build the technique. But yeah, I like that.
Yeah, totally right. Just keep yourself moving, find things that you can do, and then you're always adapting and learning. Like, you don't learn, if you don't fall on your face every once in a while, you have no idea how things are supposed to be going. So you need, they say when you're on a rocket ship, towards the moon or whatever, it's always auto-correcting like 90% of the time. Like, it's never on track. It always has to. And that's how you learn. You have to kind of, screw up, come back, and get yourself back on course. And you don't do that by staying put. You have to know, oh, no, that didn't work. Okay. But it's always about that feedback. And that gives you that lesson that, hopefully as we get older, we're figuring out more of these things, and then we know how, and as long as we do that bravely and we don't go into that avoidance and just thinking, oh, that hurt us, we just learn, okay, well, what didn't I know? What lesson can I learn from that? How can now I can apply it to make myself better? So yeah, that's super important.
That's awesome. Well, fantastic. Well, I've got to start wrapping it up, but check out any of our contact information. Also to plug the spring challenge that's going on at Northwest Personal Training. It is launched, but we don't start the adherence until next Monday, so there's still time. So I will send some links when I post this video, but definitely check that out. It's a great wellness challenge for 6 weeks starting next Monday. It's fantastic. And then do you have any chi running updates?
Pretty soon I'll have one in May. Usually I do it out of the Foot Traffic store in Vancouver here. So there'll be more information later. So it was going to be at the end of April, but we had to push it back, and we have track season and all these different things. I'm coaching at Skyview, and I'm very busy right now with the track season. And then as we get into late spring into summer, there'll be a lot more programs and offerings that I'll do on the Chi running front. So look out for that.
Awesome. Well, I look forward to all of that. And if you guys want information, give us some comments, and then I will post all of that for you. But until next time, take care of yourself, and we'll see you next week.
All right. Thanks a lot, Nick. All right. Cool.